To CyberUK 2022. This is Plenary 6, Threat Panel, chaired by NCSC Director Paul Chichester.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's great to see so many people still here, so thank you for joining us. So my name is Paul Chichester, I'm the Director of Operations at the NCSC, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be leading the last panel here of what has been an absolutely fantastic conference, and thoroughly enjoyed meeting old faces and new faces. Hopefully you've all equally had a good time. Obviously, you know, we love feedback as well, so please do let us know how we can make Belfast a similarly hugely successful event. So thank you. And with that sort of looking forward to Belfast in mind, the theme of this panel is really about the future. And when we started planning for CyberUK 2022, although that actually started in 2019, but when we started planning for it in anger, one of the things that we hadn't really sort of had was the backdrop of world events in the last year, and so the pandemic was a backdrop at that moment. Things have changed even more, and we've had even more challenges thrown at us. So what we wanted to do this afternoon to sort of end the event is really take a look at what the future holds. What might we be talking about in Belfast? What will be the key themes? And so what I'm hugely privileged to be able to do this afternoon is bring a fantastic panel of experts in their own fields together to give you their perspective and their views on what will the future hold for 2023? What will we be talking about in Belfast? And what have the last 6 months done to perhaps change some of those perceptions? It's fantastic to have, as I say, the panel members here today. I'll just quickly do some introductions. Hopefully, Merle is going to join us on the screen shortly. So Merle Maigret has a distinguished career in Europe, from Estonia, has done a significant amount of work in this field as a senior fellow in a number of organisations. I got to know Merle originally when her time took her to be the director of the CCD-COE in Tallinn as part of NATO. And so hugely glad to have Merle joining us today. We also are, I think, really privileged to be joined by Sami Khoury. Some will have by now hopefully have seen Sami in the event, seen us interviewing one another earlier on in the CyberUK 2022. Sami's had a long, distinguished career in the Canadian government and CSE, and has recently become the head of the Canadian Cybersecurity Centre. So we welcome Sami here as well. We've also joined today by Vikram Thakur, and I've known Vikram for many years. Vikram's had, again, a long career researching, investigating cyber threat, but not just investigating it, but helping as a community to respond to that, to share actionable threat intelligence, and really has a huge wealth of experience of how the threat's developed, and hopefully will share some views of how he sees that changing in the next year. It's great to welcome Lisa Fong as well, who is the director of the New Zealand National Cyber Security Centre. Again, Lisa's had a long career in New Zealand government, and for 6 years has been the head and the director of the NCSC in New Zealand, so welcome her. And finally, but by no means least, we are joined by Juliet. And Juliet Wilcox is one of our new cyber ambassadors for the Department of International Trade, and so has a potentially slightly different view on the future, one that hopefully is more optimistic about the amazing opportunities that this domain and this topic gives us going forward. And so we'll hear from her shortly. So that's the introduction for the panel. I'm going to start now by handing over to Merle and asking her to give us her reflections and perception of what's happened and what's going to happen in the future. So Merle, if I can hand over to you. Good afternoon.
Hello. Hello on my side, and thank you very much. Privileged to be addressing this what looks even from the distance a great conference. In an attempt to match the quote of the panel, I recalled the Red Queen that who told Alice that it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. And if you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast. So I think the same could be said for defending cyber computer networks. But in my short intervention, I would reflect a little bit coming from the Nordic-Baltic angle. I'd be looking at first the Ukraine and Russia conflict, and secondly, what it says and means to us in NATO and EU. Having said that, my own interaction with Kiev, with Ukraine, started 17 years ago when I moved to Kiev to work as the deputy head of NATO liaison office. It was in Kiev that my oldest son learned to say his first words and take his first steps at a Kiev playground. And it is in the same suburbs of where my former NATO office was that the Ukrainians have been fighting for the free world, built on civic responsibility, the rule of law, including free expression and free vote. The scenes, the reports that we get from Ukraine replay events and that we would never thought we would never see again. It is absolutely shocking to see Kremlin reviving military techniques of brutal cruelty. However, in cyber, things have played out a little bit more modestly. Russia really hasn't released the cyber Armageddon in its war in Ukraine. And in that regards, our expectations were worse. But just because certain expectations of the use of cyber haven't matched what we have thus far observed does not mean that Russia is not using cyber to achieve intended effects in Ukraine. And I'm sure this conference has already made reference to the great Microsoft report that has laid out that out more in detail most recently. So what I think is significant in Ukraine demonstrating its resilience, three things essentially. First, I think, is the political will of the Ukrainian leadership. Implementing and managing an effective cybersecurity starts with political will. And Ukraine has had that understanding of what Russian threat means ever since 2014, since the very first Russian intervention into the Ukraine presidential elections back then. And Ukraine has a clear has handed a clear top-down guidance since President Zelensky has assumed power. Secondly, I think there is an overwhelming industry support in Ukraine. The whole world is at help. Microsoft, Cisco, Symantec, Google, all major industry actors are helping and supporting Ukraine. And thirdly, Ukraine has really improved its defenses, especially compared to the 2014-15 when Moscow annexed Crimea. Kiev's ability to fight cyber attacks has definitely increased, bolstered further by some support from the Western governments. And the e-Governance Academy, my own organization, has done its little piece in this as well, as we've tried to bring the red against blue technical cyber attacks to Ukraine, training the Ukrainian main cyber stakeholders over the last half year before the war began. So, but more importantly, my main points, and very shortly, what are the risks of cyber attacks against the West as this conflict continues? I think the risk has always been there, because since 2002, Kremlin has begun to outsource hacking operations and cyber operations to informal actors such as activists, criminal groups, and legitimate cyber tech firms. And today, Russia is home to the world's largest concentration of cyber criminals. I think it was Chain Analysis that calculated that nearly 3/4 of the revenue from ransomware last year went to criminal groups in Russia. So given the unpredictability of Putin regime, the risk of an escalation of hostile cyber exchanges between Russia and the West definitely remains. And this is something that should inform our thinking as we are looking at the future. Some say that the Russian military, struggling to make gains in Ukraine, cannot really handle a wider war with NATO and does not want to give the alliance any excuse to enter the war more directly. But I tend to agree with Chris Krebs, the former head of US CISA, who said that the danger is that as political and economic conditions deteriorate, the red lines and escalation judgments that keep Moscow's most potent cyber capabilities, cyber proxies, in check may adjust, and the Western sanctions and lethal aid support to Ukraine may prompt Russian hackers to lash out against the West. So, what will the future bring? 6 lessons learned from war in Ukraine that I think requires particularly attention. First, politically motivated cyber attacks mandated by states that interfere in democratic processes will most probably continue. This is messing with our collective heads by undermining our confidence in our political systems through misinformation, through hack and leak, and so on. Politicians take it very seriously, and they should, but we shouldn't mix up intent and impact, and let's not make Russia's hand bigger than it is. But of course, this is there. Second field, I think, where a lot of struggle is laying out is in international law. The competition to shape the governance of cyberspace through the development of international law and norms has become a significant foreign policy issue and a battleground between states. In here, I think it's important that US and Europe understand that we are on the same side of this battle, and we should definitely band together, jointly reasserting leadership in international standard setting bodies such as UN or ITU, and mutually developing and recognizing each other's standards. It's also important to invest into work outlining responsible state behavior in cyberspace. And to take it further, I would call upon all like-minded states to contribute to the new NATO CCD-COE initiative of Tallinn Manual 3.0, which involves the revision of the current handbook on the basis of state practice and official national statements on international law, such as, for example, in a very welcome way, the UK Attorney General spelling out the UK government's legal views on the responsible use of offensive cyber that was spelled out earlier at this conference. Third point, attribution. There needs to be a consequence for acting maliciously in cyberspace. We must deny covertness by attribution. And the most recent attribution of the Russian attack against Viasat yesterday is another welcome example on this field. But attribution, and this is my fourth point, attribution is only as good as the information that the allies are willing to share about it. And here I come to the importance of intelligence sharing. Traditionally, a lot of intelligence, especially in cyber, has usually been kept very tight. Yet a lesson learned from Ukraine is that sharing intelligence is playing a major role in this war. Army General Paul Nakasona told in a hearing that in 35 years of his career, he has never seen a better sharing of accurate, timely, and actionable intelligence than what has transpired with Ukraine. And I think that is very important, and the value of that sharing has helped to build coalitions, notably also in preparing for the sanctions against Russia. Five, I think offensive cyber operations have come to stay and are probably something that we will be talking more about in the years to come. And my last point, the sixth point, is the importance of cyber capacity building efforts for partner countries. This is of strategic importance, and it really helps to project stability in our neighborhood. So, summing up this very shortly, I think in a world of increasingly linked organizations, each target is a risk to another. Attacks on companies can compromise critical national infrastructure, and attacks on individuals can open backdoors into state-level hacks. And therefore, it is important to have cybersecurity which is about risk management, solid pragmatic defense, and response measures to improve security of the digital environment. But more generally, I think stepping a few steps back from this cyber And talking about the war there more generally, I think it's clear that we are in a different world. In the span of a little more than 2 months, Putin has shattered the European and global security order. And if we are to learn a lesson from the 20th century, then I personally find the Reichstag fire in 1933 showing that a moment of shock could enable an eternity of submission, and the way how Hannah Arendt wrote about it is particularly resonating to me. She said, "I was no longer of the opinion that one can simply be a bystander." Likewise, I think we cannot remain neutral in this war in Ukraine. If Putin succeeds and gains seem worth the cost to other autocratic leaders, we may be at risk of entering a far more dangerous era. So we should do all we can to make sure that Putin doesn't win this war. Thank you.
Thank you, and some really powerful and heartfelt messages there. So a fantastic platform to kick us off, and that's great. So, Sammy, if I can turn to you next. And so you have the small task of defending a very large country. So perhaps you can sort of reflect on maybe some of the things Muriel said, but what has the last few months perhaps informed you about what your job's going to be like in the next few years?
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for being on this panel. I was named head of the Cyber Center in August of 2021. And the last 8 months have been somewhat a dizzying experience of a number of cyber incidents and managing all these cyber incidents. So day one on the job, a federal election is called, and the task of defending sort of the government, defending the country on a federal election platform. We barely come out of the federal election. The province of Newfoundland has suffered a major cyber incident that affected the healthcare system there and brought the entire healthcare system of the province down for about a few weeks. We've had to deploy some of our teams on the East Coast, on the complete East Coast of Canada, different time zone, travel restriction in the middle of a pandemic to support the province in rebuilding its IT. We come out of Newfoundland, it's the Log4j issue. Another multi-stakeholder engagement on how to mitigate the Log4j. In the middle of that, a number of ransomware incidents to manage and launch a cyber awareness campaign. We thought we'll celebrate a quiet new year. Another nation-state incident against one of our federal government department that we had to manage. And then on top of that, the Ukraine crisis and another incident that we had to manage. So all that to say is that it's been a fairly busy 6 months, or 8 months in my case. That tells me that we can't simply focus on one challenge. In our threat assessment landscape, we talk about cybercrime, we talk about strategic threat to the country, and in the last 8 months, I lived both of them. As Paul said, Canada is a huge country, east to west. It's not driving distance, or if it is driving distance, it's about 3 days driving from one end of the country to another. So managing an incident in Vancouver means 5 hours on a plane, managing an incident on the East Coast at different time zones also, and then managing up north where we deal with Aboriginal communities, different languages sometimes, has created real challenges for us. So how do we manage that breadth of variety? So it's important when I look into the future to say what has those 8 incidents or these last 8 months taught us. I think we have to take the time to stop and learn from the incident. It's extremely important to, we tend to fight the fire and then we're exhausted after fighting the fire that we jump into a new incident, but it's important to take the time to learn from the incident. Forums like that to share what we have learned are super important. We are not unique. I'm not going to pretend that any of those incidents are unique to Canada. We happen to be the victims of these incidents, but I'm sure other countries, other places around the world have lived similar incidents. So we have to be willing to talk about them. I know sometimes it could be embarrassing to admit that we've been the victim of a cyber incident, but it's important to talk about them. It's important to compare notes, to share information, to build new partnerships. We have very strong partnerships with our partners sitting here on the forum, but we need to build new partnerships also. It's been said many times, this is a team sport, it's a global problem, and it can happen to any one of us. I am concerned about the energy level, in a sense, from pacing ourselves. There are humans that manage these cyber incidents, and it's important to make sure that our teams have a bit of time to breathe, to catch up their breath. We tend to, every incident is an important incident, and we tend to put the A-team on every incident, and we need to find a way to in a way, share the pain, take the risk, lean a bit forward on our team so that we can give the exposures to others. So in a sense, what the last 8 months have taught me is that it's going to be a busy few years. We are not out of a job. It's going to keep us busy. We need the innovations that we have seen on the exhibit floor. There's amazing ideas that, as I walked around, I saw amazing ideas in development, and I hope that those amazing ideas lead to fruition and enhance the tool set of capabilities that we have so that we can collectively fight this fight on the cyber scene. So I am hopeful in a way that the community is coming together, that the community is investing many resources in capabilities, but I'm also mindful of the fact that there's a heavy burden on some of us in terms of when we look at a huge country with 1,000 or so CNI operators to build relationship with, to raise the bar. They're not all at the same level. So it is, at times it feels a little bit exhausting, but I'm hopeful that I know that I'm not alone in this fight.
Brilliant. Sami, thank you very much. And again, sort of some really interesting points we'll sort of bring together at the end. So Vikram, I'm not sure there's anything that, what have you seen neuro, in the last few years? You've done this business for so long. What do you think the future holds, and is there anything that's going to be surprising you?
I'm usually the guy in the room who comes with extremely grim news to everybody. So I'll try to put a little positive spin out here. So to understand where we're going, it's sort of important to know where we are. I know a lot of people have spoken about the Russia-Ukraine issue. We've talked about solar winds, a lot of other stuff. So I'll try to pivot on some other topics which are mundane, but they're still happening. So to understand the threat landscape, very, very, very broadly, you can sort of split the victims in two categories. First being consumers, which are very important. Those are all our constituents, home users, small businesses, you name it, my parents, everybody of that sort. So the good news is that we don't expect any novel or creative attacks to be happening against them in the coming years. So that's good news. The bad news is whatever the actors are doing today is sort of going to continue. A lot of what they do today is essentially some version of social engineering, scamming them, sending them fake invoices, calling them up, saying that they have tax problems and trying to pick up on that. And we still have a society which is very vulnerable to this. And organically, as well as through a lot of the efforts, I know the NCSC has been doing a lot of work on this front, we're trying to educate our users to be able to spot something which is amiss. And I think that needs to happen globally across everywhere. So consumer space, we're going to be definitely seeing that. Another problem that we see in the consumer space, which is going to continue in the upcoming years, is this whole concept of misinformation or disinformation. What that's really doing is it's eradicating some of the trust that has been inherent in our society over the years. And that is a really, really, really difficult problem to solve. And maybe we'll have another panel on that next year, or maybe some other conference. I'll flip over to the other side. I talked about consumers. If you look at the other group, we refer to them as enterprises. Enterprises are anything medium to small corporations, critical infrastructure, even government. All of them depend on each other to some extent, but even government acquires infrastructure support from the private sector itself, whether it's AWS, Google, Azure, whoever. But attacks against this sector are what are actually really just going to ramp up in time if they've not already peaked. And they're going to stay at that level for a very long time. What's really working is the whole of the private sector is essentially a supply chain to the government. So anybody working towards espionage, motivated attackers, they'll continue to target the heart, which is the private industry, in order to find a stepping stone to get into government, as well as whatever intellectual property that they want to find. And this is going to continue for a while. People have talked about ransomware. Yes, I think it was Rob Joyce who was saying that, ransomware volume may have decreased a little bit. Ransomware is not going anywhere, and it's been here, for those of us who've been in the industry, it's been here for almost 15 years. 15 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, we used to have a different name for it. It used to be called fake AV. Now it just pivoted from the consumer space over to the enterprise space, and this is going to continue. There might be a little bit of a lull, but it will continue. The last thing I'll touch upon, again, hitting the enterprise space a lot more, is this concept of hacktivism. And Omel talked about it a little bit, but we see it in Russia and Ukraine right now where people, patriotic hackers, they take it upon themselves to just go out and do things. We've seen wipers in Ukraine, we've seen hundreds of these attacks happen in Russia as well, and a lot of this information seems to have gotten exfiltrated, but nobody's really analyzed that data yet. In course of time, we'll get there as well. Why I mention it is because these kind of attacks are the most unpredictable in nature. When you have military going against military, the expectations or the fallout is quite predictable. When you have these random people working out of the house or their neighborhood and they want to just make an impact across the border, they become extremely, extremely unpredictable, which is going to continue as we guys see further conflicts in this region. So with that, I'll pass it back in case anybody else has more perspectives.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So sort of building on that sort of consumer and enterprise point, Lisa, perhaps you would like to talk a little bit again back about how you're defending your nation at scale in New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Chich. Do bring a small nation perspective to this conversation. New Zealand's reliant on its multilateral relationships for its resilience, but equally our size means that we can move at a pace and get reach across the economy that might not be possible in larger nations. We're also geographically remote, and geostrategic challenges are playing out far more openly these days in our neck of the woods. What I'm really trying to say is you've chosen one of the more jet-lagged people in the room to take a spin on the crystal ball. So choosing between catatonia or hysteria, I've gone slightly towards the hysteria end to keep myself awake. So two developments on the current threatscape I think provide a really nice lens into the future for us. We've talked a lot about supply chain at this conference, and I'm not going to. I see it as indication that technology is accelerating the pace and intensity of world events, not vice versa, and that cybersecurity is a lead indicator for world events. What we see unfolding in the cyberspace then has evidence out in the real world. So we should be looking to today's cybersecurity landscape as the crystal ball for the future of world events. And we should be thinking about the kind of world we want to live in and how we use our response within the cybersecurity domain as a means to that world. It's not an end in itself. I say that in particular because we've seen a lot of impact on global supply chain from a range of different words starting with C. Cybersecurity, COVID, climate change, conflict. And it's testing us all. In IT, we're experiencing this as pitching quite rapidly between really high technology states and really low technology states, from things like ransomware or dustings of software through our systems that we then need to track down. So I see a much keener focus on resilience more generally coming, and not just through risk framework, because risk framework is not working for us. We are in the risk eventuation space, we're in the issues space right now, so we need to bring options analysis to the front of our decision making so that we have sustainable business decisions and so that we have resilient government services. The second illustration I'd like to draw on is about the nature of the threat actor. And we've talked a lot again at this conference about the blurring between state and non-state sponsored actors. We see this, and we've had some lovely examples already about Russian and Ukraine aligned threat actors in respective sides of the conflict. Regionally, Pacific nations and businesses are receiving overtures all the time from other nations and their corporations, which seek to leverage short-term domestic politics for long-term strategic advantage. So in the future, as we look to build on international norms, we should think about bringing in those non-state sponsored actors. We should think about whether or not we're satisfied with the status quo and some of the enabling settings that allow non-state sponsored actors to persist, including alternate currencies. We also need to take a proactive posture in our neighbourhood without instrumentalising our relationships. But I'm an optimist about the future because I've got a really clear vision about the world I want to live in, and that's a Pacific that really lives up to its peaceful name. It's a region where, as a small nation, we continue to exercise sovereign decision-making without undue influence. There's a real power for us in the international rules-based order, withstanding with our partners when we issue joint advisories or attribution. But that doesn't mean homogeneity in our approach. And we've seen that play out in 5G, for instance. Not centrally managed. We've each taken our own domestic response, and yet the combined power of those distinct approaches remain sovereign and yet have a really important effect on the operating environment for threat actors. Partnerships with the private sector, of course, will continue to be really important to us. Domestically, that means widening our visibility of the operating environment and lifting each other's capability. And internationally, it means supporting larger partners' efforts and engaging with responsible global suppliers. The other part of our future that I'm really excited by is the widening of the skills that we're going to bring into cybersecurity. Our core business and credibility as a national cybersecurity centre will continue to rest on our technical capability, our technical skills and insights. But it's really important we recognise that we need non-technical responses to an all-of-society problem. We all, the whole world works in IT now, and cybersecurity needs to work in the world. We've seen already, I think, our roles as system leaders be really enhanced by moving a little bit outside of our comfort space, which is that technical competence. Equally, we can help others be strong system leaders in their respective domains. Finally, I think we need to prepare for that day when we're actually successful. We will have lifted cybersecurity capability across society, and that will be the day boards feel really confident that they've done the best that they can and will turn around and ask us in industry, have you done the best you could? Our nationally significant organisations will have a greater confidence and understanding where the division of responsibility should be, and they will understand the risks that they are capable of controlling and those that are someone else's responsibility, namely ours. So that is a success measure. We're always looking for those measures, but equally it's a challenge to us to remain relevant and to make sure that we earn that trust and confidence on an ongoing basis. Happily, the rate of change in technology, the pace at which world events coming to us, I think means that as leaders we should not hold on to an assumption that we have all of the solutions today. Cybersecurity is a really young industry, and it has a collaborative value and spirit and a real creativity to it. And our role as leaders is to ensure that those values and that creativity continues to thrive, and so that we look to widen the skill sets, the backgrounds of people, and the perspectives on the interventions that will make us a cyber-secure world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think thank you for giving us such a balanced sort of view of maybe the threats, but also some amazing opportunities there as well, which is really heartening. So sort of building on that, maybe Juliette, sort of maybe pick up the baton on maybe some of those opportunities as well.
Thank you. So I'm going to take this from an optimistic perspective, and it's not just because I represent trade and I know we've got some fabulous things to sell, although we do, but I want to just focus on three things really. One is managing risks rather than just looking at what the threats are. Second is the opportunities that we're looking at. And the third thing is that trust model between citizens and governments and how we can take advantage of that too. So managing the risks. Now, we know that there are plenty of risks out there, and they're not going to change, really. They're not going to go away. We've got state threats. We've got hacktivists and hackers and criminals. We've got weak standards. We've got IT that isn't built to a specification that we feel is secure. We've got technology that needs to be improved. And we've got people, and people can be an enormous weakness in our sector too, whether it's through mistake or through malign intent or through deliberate action. So we know that there are risks, but actually if you look around, and I think this conference is showing us through the people who have been here on display, we've got the skills to handle all of this. So if we anticipate and we plan and we manage and we recover from incidents effectively, I do think that we've got the ability to manage the risks that are there in front of us. So I'm quite optimistic about that for the future. The second thing, opportunities. And I often talk to the sectors in trade about how cyber is going to run through absolutely everything, and it doesn't really matter whether you're building a ship or a train or a financial sector product or a healthcare product. Cyber is going to run through everything. It's going to influence every aspect of our lives. So cybersecurity is going to be absolutely critical too. But if you look at it through the lens of one thing, just to sort of illustrate it, bring it to life, think about smart cities in the future, and around the globe there are dozens of cities who are either creating smart city environments or who are greenfield sites, so going to build from the ground up, from the sewers to the skyscrapers. They will be digital cities of the future. And so you think about what does that mean and what are the opportunities for cyber power in that sphere. And I think we can think about, I don't know how many of you do not have Alexa or Google Assistant at home. I won't ask for a show of hands right now, but I suspect there are some, but I bet the next generation don't even think about it. It's something that they want as part of their life, as part of their way of operating. I think you can look at smart cities as they're developing from the acutely benign, if any of you have seen the robots going around Milton Keynes delivering milk and bread to people, through to the grand schemes that are going to be the ground-up ability to manage the whole of a city environment, whether it's the transport or the street lighting or the rubbish collection or the things that make it sustainable economically and environmentally. So some of these things that are going to be part of the governing of everyday life, and you think, well, will this help? Will it help people who are in need of monitoring, whether they're elderly or in need in some other ways? Will it help that we'll be able to have till-free shops? What will that mean for the future of carrying money? So this is exciting, and there are plenty of opportunities there, but it also brings with it risks. What does it mean for citizens that don't have access to smartphones? What does it mean for people who can't afford to participate with the technology, or for whom the technology may discriminate against them? What does it mean for the way we keep and store data and manage it, and the way that some regimes may use that in a way which we're not happy with? So it brings with it risks, but I go back to the first point. I think we have the skills to create those smart cities of the future that will enable the ever-increasing number of people living in cities to be in a sustainable environment and manage the risks that come with it. And then finally, thinking about that trust model between citizen and government. And the way that data is collected and used is really critical to ensure that it's used effectively, but also the fact that people are willing to give up that data in order to get the benefits. And you see other trust models that are really important too. So between, and I think the NCSC model is an excellent one, of how do you relate to industry when they have victims of ransomware or have issues? Can they voluntarily give you that information so you can help manage that and then share that benefit with others? So the trust model and the things that we're developing to help society, to help individuals understand how their data is being used and stored and protected, and their privacy, that is a really important part of our future. But I do think that we have ways that we will be developing to make that possible in future. And it depends a bit on transparency too, and I think part of this model is being as transparent as you can be, so that when you can't be, you are trusted. So go back to what is the trust model between government and citizens. So I end on my point about optimism. I do think conferences like this really bring to life the notion that we should have some optimism in our future, in our ability to master and make use of our cyber power for the whole of society in all its elements. I don't think it will be without its challenges, absolutely not. The threats will be there, but I do think we can manage those risks and to look forward to a future where I think technology will be our friend.
Brilliant. Juliet, thank you. That's a fantastic way to, I think, sort of draw some of those threads together and that really optimistic look to the future. It's almost impossible to probably summarise that, but I'm going to give it a stab in the short time I've got left. I think certainly we've heard about the sort of the present threat, how I think that may still develop, and there are certainly, as the Ukraine conflict develops, increased threat there for us to worry about. I think, Sammy, it was your point that we shouldn't focus on one threat, though. There are many other things that might cause us as cybersecurity professionals to hopefully not stay awake too many nights, but so again, not focus on one thing and be realistic about the totality of the threat. I think trust was mentioned a few times in all of that, and Vikram, you talked about it from a sort of disinformation point of view. It's come up a few times. I think that's really important. And also important when you look at some of the things that have been talked about in terms of sharing intelligence, partnerships. Those partnerships are built on trust. And so I think, just reflecting that, trust is hard to build, it's very easy to lose. And so we shouldn't be underestimate the risk. Maybe perhaps we've underestimated the risk of some of that disinformation sort of threat, depending on where it lands. So I think it's definitely something to think about. I was really struck by the ambiguity and predictability of the sort of threat going forward. I think something, all of these could be sort of panel sessions on their own in terms of, maybe we're sort of co-creating the agenda for Belfast. Very much struck by the sort of international law and norms point it played into the session that we had earlier, if people were here for that, and the cyber power element, and I think that's a really important part of all of that. So almost sort of finally, I think just picking up on the maintaining energy and resilience. I think, everybody is absolutely exhausted after the pandemic, yet we're working at risk of working flat out yet again. And arguably, when we were having this conversation in the UK, we still haven't had our major cyber moment yet. Yet, our teams are almost flat out, on the back of other things. So I think looking after yourselves and looking after ourselves and our teams is something that we really do need to be focusing on in 2022. And I'll sort of wrap up, I think, and conclude there by, I think, sort of reflecting on your point, Juliet, about what an amazing sort of few days this has been, to be really optimistic that actually at the heart of our success in the future will be our people and the skills and the amazing sort of talent we've got, our ambition to grow that talent and sort of build on the success we've got, but also partnerships. So many times we've talked about this being a team sport, and I think it's probably worth concluding our sort of session just thinking about that and thinking about what an amazing team that we've been able to sort of bring together here. Hopefully we can build on that and carry on and hopefully do even more over the next 12 months and follow on the conversation for 2023 when we get together in Belfast. So thank you very much again. It's been a fantastic panel. Thank you so much to everybody. Merle, thank you for joining us and beaming in. I look forward to sort of continuing the conversation offline. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
This is Cyber UK 2022. Please welcome back to the stage the CEO of NCSC, Lindy Cameron.
Great. Thank you very much indeed to Chich for a fascinating discussion. I hope you've all picked up sufficient merchandise in your first in-person conference to make sure you're not short of mugs and water bottles and t-shirts. So before we close the conference, I am here to announce the winners of both CyberDen and the Cyber Games. So CyberDen is a bit like Dragon's Den, which seems highly appropriate with a very large, funky dragon behind me here. 10 companies pitched their idea for 2 minutes, and then 4 dragons, led very appropriately by the chief dragon, Dr. Ian Levy, and our lead sponsors, Amazon Web Services and BT, interrogate them for 3 minutes, and I know what that feels like. And then 1 winner emerges. But actually this year, the entries were so good that in fact we picked 2 winners. The prize is that we and others will help to build their products or develop their businesses to be as successful as they can be. So get ready, because I'm about to call the winners up to the stage and ask them to come up for a handshake and a photo. So I'm delighted to announce that this year's winners of the CyberDen are Caps Lock, who I hope are moving towards me at this minute. Please come up to the stage. And the second one is Exa Lens. So Caps Lock won for retraining people to get into cybersecurity in a novel and cool way. And I was actually hearing about it at dinner last night, and it sounds absolutely fantastic, particularly for mid-career professionals. And Exa Lens won for security from manufacturing systems in factories with a totally new approach. So Caps Lock, congratulations. Thank you very much indeed. Well done, thank you. Really brilliant. Well done. Seriously, BT were telling me about how amazing you were last night, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. So brilliant, thank you very much indeed. Great, and then if I could congratulate, then Exa Lens. Very good, excellent. Thank you very much indeed, well done. And let's sort of look forward to it. Thank you. Fantastic, so congratulations to our two amazing winners. We look forward to seeing you at the Cyber TV stand. I hope they did warn you that you might end up on YouTube as a result of this. On the atrium afterwards to discuss next steps with Dr. Levy. So if you could head towards the Cyber TV stand, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So there have also been some other winners in the Cyber Games. I have to say, I went past the Cyber Games yesterday and discovered a slightly perturbed team from NCSC staring at the leaderboard, wondering why they weren't in the lead. Those emerging victorious are, in third place, Elsung 289. In second place, Cyber Joe. I have no idea how they're interpreting these. And then the Cyber Games winner of 2022 is Interrupt Rob. And those three will receive some wonderful prizes provided by Dragos, who sponsored the game. So thank you very much indeed to Dragos for your support of Cyber UK. We really appreciate it. And I did say an awful lot of people sitting enjoying those games through the last couple of days. So now it just falls to me to call Cyber UK 2022 to a close. I am sure that you will agree this has been an absolutely fantastic event. We've had fascinating speeches, panel discussions, a brilliant array of dynamic exhibitions, great opportunities to meet new people, and I think even better, fantastic opportunities to reconnect with old contacts. For me, it's been superb to see so many people in the flesh that I've only seen on a screen for the last 2 years, so thank you. It has been amazing. This conference really is a microcosm of the whole of society approach we've been talking about for the last 2 days, and it has really felt that the Cyber UK community has come back together again, so thank you. You have been amazing. If you're regretting missing any sessions, you can catch up on Cyber UK TV, the YouTube channel, where you can watch any key moments from the conference back again, so please do get there. I heard Harry earlier making an utterly shameless pitch to get his session from last year higher up in his incident management session. So you may find you're being nobbled by some of the NCSC team who want to make sure their ratings have improved. And I think last year, it felt really good to stage Cyber UK remotely, because that was what we could do at that point last year. And while we have been live streaming some of the sessions on YouTube, there definitely just isn't anything like, I think, coming together in person and being able to do this in the hybrid way we've been doing it. So thank you so much indeed. But before I formally close the event, I wanted to thank all of the people who've made this a success. First of all, thank you again to our sponsors, especially, I think, to our lead sponsors, Amazon Web Services and BT. You have made this possible, and we are immensely grateful for the fact that you allow this community to come together. Thank you also to all of our exhibitors. I was really struck by the fact that you have stalls manned by founders and CTOs of organizations. The conversations going on were not a sales pitch. They were really a deep conversation between partners of the future. So thank you not just for turning up and exhibiting, for actually bringing some of your best people to come and have the conversations that we want to have here. It's been such a privilege to have you all here. Thank you also to our speakers and panelists. It's been an amazing privilege to have such a fantastic array of speakers and panelists, and I've had people raving about some of the sessions they've been at. I particularly wanted to thank our international attendees for joining us. I know that my Australian colleague had to leave last Thursday lunchtime in order to get here, so I particularly wanted to call out a big thank you to Lisa Fong and Abby Bradshaw for making it all the way from New Zealand and Australia, respectively, to be here today. So thank you very much indeed to them, but also to all of the other international colleagues, many of whom got together today to just catch up for making it here. It really matters to us to have you here together with us this week. But this event wouldn't have been possible without the dedicated team that live and breathe Cyber UK all year round. And you really had better believe that preparations for Cyber UK 2023 have already started. I saw the Northern Ireland team recceing the location, checking out what they do differently. So we're getting ready, but it's a huge commitment, and it takes a lot of effort from the team that do this. I think many of you know our fantastic events team, Braylano Events, who run this and without whom we couldn't do this. It is just a fantastic commitment. They are utterly professional. Thank you also to the ICC Wales. I know that you've had a tough time in COVID, and you know, this is an amazing reopening of that possibility. So thank you. You know, I hope others use this venue. It's really been fantastic. Also, thank you to Celtic Manor and all the staff who've made us feel so welcome. Now, they might have been slightly overwhelmed when the bar ran out of beer last night. I think they weren't quite sure what they were expecting. And apparently this happened in the brewery as well, so I think we have a little issue to fix in expectation management. Huge thanks to Mark and Ben, our amazing sign language interpreters. As Ian said, Ian Levy commented last night on the slightly scary thing about having somebody translate in real time for you. So I don't know how they do such a fantastic job, but I think we all need to learn the sign for cybersecurity by next year. Thank you also to my team at NCSC. The team that's worked in this conference is both the core team, but also a much wider team of people who've been involved in preparing sessions. It has been a superb team effort, with people across the NCSC contributing. But, and I think many of you know this also, there is a core team of people without whom this simply wouldn't have been possible, and I have been completely panic-stricken that one of them would fall over with COVID in the last week. So a big shout-out in particular to Della, Emer, Ali, Jake and Jane in the events team, who have been stars this week. So finally, and most importantly, thank you to you. Cyber UK wouldn't exist if it wasn't for all of you and if you didn't want to come to it. I think we got 2,300 people, or 2,300 passes issued on the first day. So it's been an extraordinary turnout and a really amazing sense of just buzz and excitement as you go around the building. I really hope you've enjoyed coming to Cyber UK 2022 or watching it online if that's what you've done. And please do let us know what you've enjoyed. It has been really fantastic to put this on, but we want to know how we can do even better. I personally am super excited that Cyber UK 2023 is going to be held in my home country of Northern Ireland. So please put the dates in your diaries now, 19th to the 20th of April, 2023. I should remind some of you that there is a small piece of water between here and Northern Ireland, so you will need to plan your logistical arrangements involving planes or ferries to make it, so don't leave that to the last minute. And what we're going to see you out with is a short video of Northern Ireland to whet your appetite for what we're going to see. So I look forward to seeing you in Belfast in 2023, but please keep in touch in the meantime. This is a fantastic community. Thank you, and safe travels.